I want to start this by saying that I am speechless. I finished the final episode, it's an hour and a half long, and I don't really know what to say. Like, I'm happy, I'm glad, I'm sad, I'm kind of feeling a lot of different things. This journey, this epic tale for Attack on Titan has finally come to a close. And yeah, I've been following the manga for years, and watching that come to a close was just as sad and exciting, but also very... There was so much discourse and disconnect within the community, and no one really knew where to sit. Some people really love the ending, some people really hate it, some people sit in the middle and not really sure, and I was very nervous with how would they potentially rectify potential issues? How would they go about adapting certain scenes and situations and portraying these emotions that are very convoluted and complex and all over the place? How would Isayama feel? What type of work would he do for the anime, which we now know that he was directly involved in and changing a lot of aspects? Whatever your answer is, wherever you lie, whatever you feel about Attack on Titan in its conclusion, both manga and anime, I think there's a bit here for everyone. Oh no. Personally, for me, I think the anime has done wonders. It has smoothed over a lot of those rough edges that were there within the manga, and a lot more. The anime allows you to take time to dwell on scenes emotionally, to provide context, to invoke a sense of feeling that potentially wasn't really there. Clarity is also a big thing with the anime. You get a much better understanding on where characters sit mentally and emotionally, how they feel about other characters' actions, and just going through with a grinder. And for me, this is not a slight or an attack towards Isayama, the author. If anything, I have a lot of respect for him for writing the manga and concluding it the way that he did, but still coming back after, many years later, to make the changes that he felt were adequate. And you could argue, oh, this is in response to the fans hating it and not really liking it, and he's come back and felt implied to do it, like yada yada. I get it. For someone that has been working on this story for so many years, that receives so many death threats, so many... but to still come back to this toxic environment after all that backlash and want to change certain elements, I appreciate that. Leave a like and subscribe. For the people that have hate the ending, you're most likely still gonna hate the ending. That's all you. But for the people that sit in the middle, for the people that were a little bit unsure, didn't really know how to feel about the manga, I think the anime will point you in a much better direction. I think you will enjoy it, and I think there's just so much more to take from the animation ending. Even if you're not a fan of the writing aspect, the music, the animation, the scale of everything is absolutely superb. And this is an hour and a half worth of content. This is a full-length movie. For every person that has creatively touched this show, they deserve the world. They deserve everything. Every hard-working, talented individual that have poured their blood, sweat, and tears into this production deserve it all. You knocked it out of the park. This is not an easy thing to do with a company like MAPPA when it comes to big wigs and corporations that are controlling this in a really horrible way. And yet still the talent shines. Still so many people have sacrificed so much to work on this show, and I think that should be applauded. To me, this was a movie-like experience. An hour and a half worth of content is a lot to digest, and it went past just like that. Before I knew it, I was at the ending, I was witnessing the conclusion and the clarity of all of these situations, and it was fun. It was entertaining. It was like edge of your seat, nail-biting situation. For a lot of you, you probably didn't know what was going on. What is this big worm? What is this big titan? Like, what happened to Eren? What is all this stuff? And while a lot of it isn't necessarily explained, a lot of it isn't really explored in depth, and it's all kind of implications, maybe even a bit of theory crafting, it is entertaining as hell. I'm gonna say it right now, I like the direction they went with Eren. This boy, this man, this child is very difficult to pull off successfully. These are heavy politics, heavy issues, society as a whole, not just two nations at war. This encapsulates the entire world. This event, this is disgusting, it's tragic, it's horrifying. You're not meant to view Eren as a savior. You're not meant to view him as some sort of glorified hero. He's a monster. He is a terrible human being that is enslaved to his own freedom. When you see the process of his elimination to get to this point, because he wasn't always like this, it's
you tripping.
The sacrifices that one had to make to get there is tremendous. And I think a lot of people purposefully leave out the lengths that he went through to get to this mindset, the hurdles, the mishaps, the missteps. And I really love how both episodes kind of like to clarify it for you, just to remind you what he did. This wasn't his first and only option. He tried, he sought other endeavors, he desperately tried to seek other things, and you could see him break little by little. By the time Eren activated the rumbling, it's pretty much safe to assume that he was long gone. It's not the Eren that you know. He forced himself into this mental state, and I really like how the show kind of emphasizes the different changes in his personality leading up to this point. When it's reflected on within the end half of the episode, when you see him as a child, when you see him as a young teenager, and then a little bit older, current self, they're very different. His emotional vulnerability is completely all over the place. You can see his mind crumbling under the weight of harboring this power that is so incredibly unknown to anyone. The paths, the founding titan ability, it is not safe. It is not easy. It is not carefully studied. This is something that affects people differently. And when it comes to Eren, the only information that we have, the past, present, and future has all blurred into one, and you could only imagine, can only think about the consequences that would have on his mind. Someone trying to go forward, someone trying to find his freedom for himself, for his friends, for Eldians. All he sees is everything. He sees pain and destruction and misery every step of the way, including his own. All of this clouded him. Now that's not an excuse, but more so an understanding of his character on why you see him in specific points break that hardy, edgy, kind of cold-faced expression that a lot of people really loved. Eren at the end of the day was a child, a boy, enslaved by his freedom, just like every other character that's a slave to something. Armin being a slave to knowledge, Mikasa being a slave to love, Reiner being a slave to regret or guilt. There's so many different perceptions or perspectives that you can have, and that's probably the most valuable lesson that I think Attack on Titan tries to tell you. This isn't just some political warfare. This isn't just a nation against another nation. Everyone is both in their right and in their wrong. There's no black and white, and that's obvious to a lot of people, but when it comes to these characters, when you start to, I guess, kind of look at their actions, you can't look at those actions in black and white either. People are really with the idea of Eren being human, expressing himself to Armin. And while the word choice may not be the best, I think it's kind of sad that that's the last thing you see. It's not the edgy Titan Eren. It's not this cold-faced killer that's murdering the world. No, it's just him. All of his emotions on display, all of his mind scrambled thanks to the power of the paths, and him not having any control on what's going on. Mind you, Armin is seeing these memories before he becomes the founding Titan, before the rumbling even begins. So when he becomes this Titan, he still is that edgy, cold-faced killer. That's the last characteristic that he has. It's just where these memories are placed are seen after by Armin. This is Armin remembering them. And I really love the change with Armin's approach to this whole situation, right? Because he said some really weird words in thanking Eren in an odd way, which felt weird when you kind of mix that with mass genocide and all of this stuff. It feels odd. Instead, with the context given, the time, the emotional expression and vulnerability between both Eren and Armin, I feel like it makes it more clear that Armin is trying to take a lot of guilt away from Eren, trying to burden it with him, but not necessarily by stealing it or by patting him on the back or trying to make him feel better. Instead, he takes the burden with him, saying that they will go to hell together. They'll see each other again in hell. And I think that line, that change, very small change, is very, very powerful. It makes it more clear in my eyes that Armin is shouldering the burden with Eren, and it's something that he's always done throughout the story. He's a very compassionate, empathetic individual, and it tells a lot for his character through all of this, through everything that he's experienced as well, that he can look at Eren and still say all of these things. Mind you, Armin has not experienced it yet up to this point. This is all the stuff that Eren's telling him what's going to happen before it does, and using visual storytelling to do it. But I still think it's a beautiful change. I also really enjoy the added emphasis towards Mikasa. The manga was very quick in kind of getting through everything, and that's to be expected because you're in a shorter kind of time frame, one chapter every single month. You gotta fit in everything you can between pages and panels. With this, however, an hour and 30 minutes of just straight beauty, you can spend a lot more time with Mikasa and this whole idea of love. This still might throw a lot of people off. Actually, I feel like I know it will throw a lot of people off. Where does it come came from. It's never been here. It's always been here. Eren portrays it to you and how he tries to push everyone away to do it. Armin even acknowledges it multiple different times. And Mikasa is also dealing with an ability that is kind of oddly connected to Eren in a lot of ways, but at the same time never being able to express herself as part of that character because she's very nervous, but she's always looking after Eren. So this isn't going to be portrayed as a rom-com, hence the environment that they're raised within and all the issues and death that's upon it. Like, romance is not their first thought. Love is not their first thought. They're not even thinking about them living old enough to be able to experience love to such an extent. So when it comes back now, you can see the desperation for Mikasa, the love that she has for Eren. Everyone is ready to kill him. Everyone's ready to... But she's so hesitant. Even though she's the one that has to pull the trigger, even though she's the one that is destined to do it, she can't. She tries to buy off as much time as she can, and it's sad. It is tragic to watch her kind of slowly, ever so slowly, come to this acceptance that there is nothing more that they can do, that Eren can't be stopped, that Eren can't be saved. However, they nail it out the park. The conclusion with her and Eren...
So good and tasty.
When she slices off Eren's head, when she kisses him, when she experiences her vision that Eren gave to her, absolutely gorgeous.
IDGAM.
Now the ending is where a lot of things really could have went wrong. Eren is buried under a tree. Very symbolic. It's been there since day one. It's what he woke up from. It's a beautiful place. You see snippets of the future, right? Because at this point, 80% of humanity has been destroyed. Everything's kind of gone back to an equal footing. You can think about it as an extinction level event. This one being human driven. It basically begins where everything ends, right? It's real metaphorical to the whole path power that he has and being able to see his destiny, his death, this whole situation. Very tragic. The person that continues to see him over the years is obviously Mikasa. Now you can argue between yourselves if she has a child, if she has a family, if she's with Jean, who cares? Doesn't really bother me. Her send-off, however, I think is immaculate, both within the scarf pulling by the bird. I think that's a beautiful scene, but also her death. She dies and she gets buried right there with Eren, with that scarf as well. Now, a lot of people pointed out the type of flowers and the type of gown, the type of things that she was wearing in her death, like of old age, but she managed to live all the way to the end. There's also a small frame of Armin being the last one standing, which is a beautiful reference, very sad one, of him saying that he always chased up this tree towards that hill. So Eren died first, then Mikasa, then Armin. What's different about this whole situation, the small snippet after it, what happens in the future, how much time did Eren actually buy? 2 years, 20 years, 200 years, 2,000 years. It's kind of a little bit iffy. Originally, people didn't like this ending, that the Titan power would come back eventually, because it seems pretty wild that destroy 80% of humanity only for the world to destroy itself again through war and conflict as it normally does, but it would only buy 20, 200 plus odd years potentially. The implication is that 2,000 to 20,000 years has now actually passed. There has been multiple global resets that keep coming back, and the final one leads to the founding Titan ability that's buried underneath that tree. This isn't 200 years later. This isn't potentially 2,000 years later. It's much more. And I think understanding that gives you a much bigger perspective on not only the role that Eren was playing when it comes to equaling out the world, but also seeing the conflict that happens because of it. It's always bound to happen. It always will happen. The world destroys itself constantly over and over again because of this type of war. The saddest but somewhat most symbolic thing is that through all of this, Eren is found once again. The founding Titan is found once again. Like it did with Eren, like it did with Ymir, it will bring forward a different realm of humanity. This is the core of Attack on Titan's story. The cycle of hatred never ends, and it never will. Like Armin and Zeke, you can only value the times that you have. You can only try and make the most of that time. In a way, Attack on Titan ended pretty much how it began. And whatever future you would see from there is just going to boil down in the conflict once again, because one group of people have otherworldly power that other people don't. Conflict brews, politics get involved, power gets involved, and war takes over. Personally, I think writing endings like this is very difficult. Writing a character like Eren is very difficult. One could argue that you assassinated his whole character because he wasn't a genocidal maniac. I get it, but at the same time, I actually appreciate the more subtle, simple, and straightforward approach that they took. He was lost. He was a child. He thought he was right, but also knew that he was wrong. The emotions you see at the end of his story that Eren's betraying takes place before he goes into the Founding Titan. You still get your edgy Eren Yeager. You still get his killer a massacre personality. That's the point. He sacrificed everything. He sacrificed his own humanity. He sacrificed his own mind, everything to become that killer. And the only way that he would ever see some sort of peace, whether it be in hell, whether it be in his own vision within the past, living with Mikasa artificially, his friends would have to kill him. And he knew that. A lot of you probably have questions about the worm. What is the hallucinogenia? What does that even represent? Why does it not die? All you need to know is that it is a representation of life and power. It has a lot of references from Norse mythology. It has a lot of reference to quite literally being the creation. This thing is not an entity, it's not an object, it's not a life form. This is more closer to being a god or a concept. When it's structured around the idea of life, immortality, the balance of time, past, present, and future, it's going to be perceived very differently by the people that wield it, like Ymir, like Eren, like potentially the kid that comes in contact with it at the end. Try not to overthink it. Don't put too much stock onto that worm, onto the hallucinogenia. It's very metaphorical. It's very supernatural, quote unquote, in a way. It's ethereal. That's kind of the whole point. You could kind of do Attack on Titan without it. It'd take a lot of redesigning and changing, but I think it adds a different element to this story. One that's very difficult to understand, comprehend, and even write, but one that's very entertaining and unique in a lot of ways. It has a lot of references and homages to Norse mythology, Ragnarok, hallucinogenia being kind of a reference to Nidhogg, which is a serpent that's underneath the world tree, you name it. Like, there's so many different things involved. It's as deep as you want to make it. At the end of the day, I enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed this take on the ending, and I appreciate it through and through. I really, really enjoyed it. And I wonder if all of you did too.